welcome back in our next episode in the series on how to build a single-ended 807 amplifier. I know we've been on a break for a while, but had a bunch of other projects I needed to kind of get out of the way and some customer gear in between there that had been in the queue for a long time. So hopefully we'll get back at this thing and finish it up here over the holidays. So as you can see, I've got the transformer end bells painted and tried a couple times with the wrinkle paint. I was going to go that route, and I've just came to the conclusion I'm not good at that. So I struggled with it. So I ended up stripping these things down and got them painted black, and I think they'll go well with the chassis at this point in time. You can kind of see the grain pattern here on the chassis. It's a hammer tone. It's black underlying with a gold hammer tone on it. I think it'll end up looking really well. Let's get these transformers put together and start getting stuff on the chassis. Okay, we got the chassis in here on the bench, as you can see. One thing you'll find out when you get things powder coated, if you don't already know this, is that the powder coating itself can be a hindrance here to your sockets and such fitting back into the holes they once did. So I personally end up using a little just like a little emery stone here on the Dremel, and go around and kind of take down the edge here and get it back to the metal pretty much, so that the items will fit back in the holes. There's a thickness to this powder coating that comes into play here in your holes and whatnot. You can see how snug this one is. I can't even get it all the way through there, but I went around with the Dremel on this one, and things fit nice and snug. Okay, I'm using number 4-40 3/8 inch. These are black button head hex screws, as you can see here. And I'm just using stainless steel K-lock nuts that already have the washers built onto them for the back side. As you can see there, just tightening them down on both sides here on the back, and they really look nice here on the top side. Just barely see these black little button heads in there. Okay, a couple things to think about as you're doing this. One, I like to put all the keyholes going one direction here, with the number 1 kind of pointed towards the front of the amp here. But if you were going to tag any grounding lugs off of these points right here for grounding anything locally here, you would need to grind down some of this powder coating underneath the chassis so that this bolt and this lug and whatnot is actually tying to ground. I don't think I'm actually going to do that on this one, but I'll put a little bit of thought into it here real quick. Okay, I went and studied the schematic a little bit, and I'm going to end up just grinding off here at this point and this point. These are where 2 terminal strips are going to go, and I would tie any grounds from here to those points. So we'll remove the paint here on these so we get a good ground connection. As you can see there, nice little Dremel etch out there with pretty easy to make into whatever shape you want, but this paint powder coats on are pretty good, so you have to get down to the metal there. Alright, got 2 of them done. And on the 807 tube sockets here, due to their thickness or whatnot, I'm having to use some, these are 6/32 1/2 inch long, and then the 6/32 K-locks. I'm really a big fan of these little button head hex in the middle. They're nice and round and smooth once you get them in there. They just, you know, at the end of the day, they look great. You do have to be careful when you go to mount these. They are ceramic, so you got to be careful with that, and you want to try to get this thing centered up as much as possible here. And they turned out pretty darn well there. Happy with that. Alright, worked out pretty good. Not perfectly centered here. My little screw holes on the side are off, but both tube sockets fit down within the metal realm there. It's kind of the pros and cons of doing everything by hand, but I think it's going to turn out looking quite well. And one thing I will tell you is I like to mount all the little stuff, tube sockets, IAC connector, fuse holder, volume knob, etc., before I actually get into mounting the hardware on the iron on here, because once you put the iron on here, it's heavy and can kind of get in the way a little bit, so it's harder to move this thing around. So mount all the little stuff first. Okay, we've got the AC connector now and the fuse holder mounted. By the way, when you go to mount the fuse holder, one side of this little lock nut right here will have a cutout on the inside of it, and it's designed to slide over this little tab as you go to put it on. As you can see, we just locked the AC connector down with some more of those little button heads, and I think they look great. Well, I'm not sure exactly what I was doing, but when I drilled these holes here, did not get them big enough for my RCA jacks. So we're going to have to take this back to the bench and drill these two holes out a little bit. Alright, I came to realize what I had done. I had drilled my pallet holes, but I had never drilled out the actual holes for the RCAs to drop down in. So we just used the little uni-bit, step bit thing here on a cordless drill here, and just took them the rest of the way out. It took about 20 seconds. I really like these RCA jacks that I'm using here. They're made by a company called CMC. Not exactly cheap. They're silver, so or silver plated, but these things are just super well made and will hold up for many years. And as you can see, they mount in really nicely. They have both red and white indicators inside, as well as here on the back side. And then on the inside, nice little lugs to mount to. I'm not worried about whether these things ground here at the chassis level, because I'm actually going to pull grounds back to a common place. Okay, similarly, the same brand stuff here, CMC. You know, a set of these about 10 or 12 bucks. A set of these about $8, I think it is. So you have 20 bucks in your jacks, but I think it's well worth it on an amp you're building. Yeah, these are not your cheap Chinese-made, you know, set of banana jacks for $1 or less. It's pretty high-quality stuff here. So, one thing to note: unless your chassis is very thick, you're going to end up with one side here that has a little kind of recess or protruding area that goes through your hole to kind of keep the thing still. And you're going to want to put the you got the same thing on this other washer, but you're not going to want to use it. You're going to want to put the flat side forward, otherwise you'll end up with two of the little protruding ends together, and if your chassis is not very thick, it'll never tighten down. Okay, mounted, and you'll notice I've got both sides of the little soldering well here on each side, and things turned out looking great. Okay, got them all mounted up on here. Looking really nice. These things are super well made, and I always put the red on the right, if you'll notice here. But happy. Up next, I got some rubber grommets, and try to get them in these holes, and then two down in these little holes here for the plate caps of the 807s to go down through. And by the way, I just picked these up at a Lowe's. You can order them, but it costs you more in shipping. Your local Lowe's Hardware, they have a drawer section there with all the screws that you can pull out and has rubber grommets in it. As you can see, that fits. Sometimes when you start to put a rubber grommet in, these things feel like they're way too big for the hole you're trying to put into them, but you just have to kind of work them. I usually get one side going really well and keep pushing around, and sometimes I use some of the rounded edge to kind of push these things down in there. Yeah, always check both sides too to make sure they came through all the way. Sometimes you have to pry a little bit to get them all the way through on the other side. Okay, check it out. We got the rubber grommets for the transformers and for the plate cap wires. I'll be honest, it took as long to put these 5 in as it did to mount anything else on this thing. It takes a little bit of work sometimes. And if you use a screwdriver to help push things down, be careful. You can punch a hole right through the side of those things really easily. Okay, got the power switch in here on the front, and did end up having to use the Dremel a little bit to kind of ream out that hole to get it where it would slide down in there nice and snug. But I love these little switches. They mount in great with a 3/4 inch hole, and then they just a little bit of work. You got to put a notch on one side there for the little guide, but they work out great. Okay, I went to mount this in from the back side, and I noticed it wouldn't hit flush, and then I realized they've got a little guide pin right here, and so I'm going to have to end up putting this back through here, and right where that guide pin's at on that side, you can see there, mark a little spot and drill another little hole, because that thing keeps this thing from spinning once you get it in there. And actually I decided to go another route, because then you'll be able to see that from the back side. I'm just going to take this thing off here with a little cutting wheel, because I think no more than we're going to be turning this thing. I can tighten it down enough here that it'll stay still. Alright, we got the front of the amp. I'll end up having to cut this off at some point once we figure out what knob we want to get it put on it. That's usually one of the last things I do. I get the amp all put together and then find a knob that seems appropriate for the rest of the amp. I love using old vintage knobs. So we'll do that, and then we'll cut this thing off to the right length to match up with that knob. But everything at this point, other than the transformers, oh yeah, we still got to put our terminal strips in this thing. Okay, as you can see, I've cleaned off all these spots now where I'm going to mount terminal strips, because I do want to get grounds from those things. And I'm doing one of those right now. Oh, you get the idea. But that's where the ground lug's going to go, back here for the 3-wire ground on the power cord. Okay, we've got our terminal strips mounted in here now at this point, and I ended up with an extra hole here. I'm not sure exactly how, but I'll just fill it from the other side with a button head screw. And but yeah, I mounted, if you notice, these kind of doubled these up. It gives me ability to connect between them here and or on the outer parts over here. And if I need to jumper these, I can. And this gives me ability to connect here to these tube sockets, and so far looking good. Okay, you can see how it looks from the top, all mounted up there. Looks nice and sleek with all these black button heads in here. And then the front end's going to look just as equally as impressive. Let's get the iron mounted on this thing. Alright, we got to get these original screws out of these EdCore transformers, because as much as I like the EdCore line, and I think it's really good value for the money, I mean, you'll never build a super top-end amplifier with these, but I think for the money, they're some of the best things going right now. I really hate Transcender went out of business, or that they've quit taking in work. But at any rate, the blue, I just cannot deal with it. I don't know what it is, and I also can't stand the sticker. I just it kind of takes over your amp, and all of a sudden, I've seen people post, "Oh, check out this EdCore amp." Well, it's not an EdCore amp. Somebody using an EdCore transformer on an amp. But yeah, we're going to swap these out for the black. Once you get the 4 bolts or nuts off here, they just pull out, and you just got to kind of be careful. You see, and we'll end up using these same screws. If I had some black button heads this same size, I would certainly use them, but I don't think I do. I will double check. But and as much as I'm all for American-made products, I'm probably going to get rid of this sticker. It just doesn't belong on my amplifier. And these stickers, if you just get a razor knife or something underneath of them, they'll lift up and come off. A couple things I really like about the EdCores, they tell you on the bobbin here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They also have a sticker on the bottom of it with all the, tells you what wires go to what. I think they do a great job making a product. Alright, I had these from another project, and I forgot I even had them. These are 8 30" by 1 3/4 inch kind of knob head here with, and then I've got 8 30" K-locks. And the way I'm going to put these on, if you notice, I got these black transformer covers now, which I just think look sexy. I love the matte black finish. But the yellow and white wires go to the speakers, okay? And these wires here will end up going to the plate cap and whatnot. So if you kind of take a look at the amp and the way these things are going to mount, you're going to want the speaker wires, the yellow and black, going to the back here because it'll go straight to the speaker connections. And so I'm going to put these bolts in so that they go in this way, and then the silver knob will be on the back side there. So you end up making sure you put both of the little spacers in here and kind of feed that in, and then you can start putting your K-lock washer on here. K-lock nut on here at this point, and you'll see this thing's gonna I think it's gonna end up looking really good here. I'm just not a fan of these big silver on anything I do, big silver screws. You know, a lot of companies used to use those for various things. Matter of fact, that's a bag of original Dynaco screws right there that were used on a lot of things. I just think an amplifier with the silver sticking all over it doesn't look near as good as the black screws. Okay, the new and improved blacked out Ed core transformer. I think this thing's look really sharp like that, so we're going to roll with it. The beauty is now that I bought one set of those to replace. I've got these, so the next time I go to the powder coaters to get something done, I'll just drop these off with them, and they'll bead blast them and get all the paint off of them, and then paint these whatever color I need with the amplifier. And I'll save these screws, throw them in the used screw box in there. They'll come in handy at some point, I'm sure. Okay, we're just putting the transformers down now, and I'm using these number 832 3/8 inch to kind of go down in and hold the transformer to the chassis here. Okay, we've got these all bolted down, looking nice on here. You can see the underside here starting to look like an amp. It's got a few wires, but you can see here the K-lock washers locked all those down. I did decide I'm not crazy about these silver bolts. They just kind of, there's nothing else on it silver. So I went ahead and ordered some 8/32 2.5 inch bolts and some shoulder washers. So should be here in a couple days if Christmas doesn't kind of get in the way here. And we'll kind of wrap this phase up. Or actually, we can move on to the next, and I can come back and fix this later. It'll be a little bit of a pain, but oh yeah, one more thing to mount. Well, if you remember, I originally drilled 2 holes on the side over here to mount these chokes, kind of in a horizontal pattern there. Well, tried to the best of my might the tube sockets here. I didn't account for how far over those things came, because I think I used the Molex over here when I was modeling it, and these come over a good probably 1/2 inch further. So I've figured out that I can actually mount these things right down in here, and I will get a nice little spot right about here for these things, one on each side, and that will I'll end up drilling 2 more holes, and I'll just plug these other holes with some bolts. But you kind of get the idea here at this point. Although I'm mighty close to this power switch, I'm going to have to study that a little bit. It's going to be a little snug on this side, but I think with some heat shrink wrap will be just fine. The beauty is these transformers sit flush right here with the edge of these chokes do. So I'll get these drilled out and get them mounted. Okay, we ended up drilling 2 holes here and mounting these chokes like this. And the good thing is, like I said, they're flush right here with the bottom of the chassis. So when the cover goes over it, it'll sit right on top of that. A little bit tight right here when I go to put the solder the switch leads on. I'm just going to slide some heat shrink tubing down over both sides so that there's no chance. I got about 1/8 inch here between that lug and the transformer. Let me flip this thing over. Okay, the little amp is quite heavy at this point in time. I might go take it in here and weigh it in just a minute. But as you can see here, nice and solid. Got all of our connection, points mapped out underneath here. Got these chokes under. These chokes really make this thing heavy, and you can kind of see the back side here. I'm gonna flip it over and put the tubes in it and let you take a look at it off the camera mount here. Okay, what do you think about this little thing? I think it looks pretty. I really like the profile of it. The transformers don't overtake the tubes, all nice and cleanly mounted up here. So you'll have the plate caps that come down and feed through a grommet on each side. But I'm pretty happy with how this thing turned out. Don't have the right tubes in it right now. It's 3 different types of 6s and 7s there. But I'm going to go ahead and call it a wrap for today. And I'm going to title this one something like Mounting All the Hardware. And next time we'll get into wiring this thing up. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay tuned.